Well, the time is just gone 13 minutes past 9 on News and Views this morning, and still to come shortly, we will be talking about the trade war between the United States of America and China saying that this will end in failure. And we know this tariff war that is taking place where we've seen Donald Trump, a loose cannon, saying something and then backtracking. And we've seen that now. We've seen a pause to his steep tariffs that he's imposed on dozens of countries. He's now kept them at 10% for 90 days, but excluding China. What does this actually mean for the global economy, considering that both the United States of America and China are the largest players in the global economy? And shortly, we will be joined by Professor David Monyae, and also taking a look this morning at the cracks in the cockpit, which is what it is being termed as, where around 970 Israeli pilots are now facing expulsion for opposing the Gaza genocide. And we'll be talking with Prof. Jeff Halper out of Jerusalem this morning about this as well. So these are just two of the stories coming through from now right until 10 a.m. But right now, we're going across to be joined by Professor David Monyae, UJ Center for Africa China Studies Director and International Relations and Foreign Policy Expert. Prof. David, good morning to you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good morning to you and to all listeners. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm sure you are watching with interest what is playing out in the United States of America, Donald Trump. And since this man has taken office, we've just seen so much come through from him, signing of executive orders, imposition of tariffs, and backtracking. And in a short space of time, we're trying to actually make sense of what is actually taking place. But we knew that taking China on would be risky for Donald Trump.
I think we expected all what is happening. We had the experience of the man in his first administration, and we listened to him quite carefully throughout the campaign. And there's absolutely nothing new that he's doing that we were not expecting. But the degree and magnitude and the impact thereof of what he's doing, both domestically and internationally, it comes at a quite shock. This man hasn't reached 100 days in office in his second term. Already, the flooding is, so to speak, the term that they use, flooding the platform, is that on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, he's taking action that the world cannot keep up with. And the impact is massive, particularly on trade and the trade war with China. That has huge implication, not only between the two countries, but the rest of the world, and more importantly, our continent.
Prof, how deliberate is this move by Donald Trump? Is this organized chaos? Is this done with a plan in mind?
There is Project 2025. I think if you go through that project, it's a right-wing regaining, taking United States back, America first. If you go back, it goes back as in the 20s, and it's a right wing that has now regrouped, consolidated, and now in the White House. And the impact is massive for Americans, massive for the world. And I think what we're seeing is the decline of the United States, because the entire system of capitalism is built on trust. And if you start knocking and having trust deficit, particularly with strategic partners of the United States, and an important country such as China, economy is number 1 and 2, it will have quite a huge impact on the post-1945 world order. Trade and so many other things, as we all know, requires certainty, requires rules of the game, norms and values that need to be pursued. jointly through organizations such as United Nations and the agencies, more importantly, your WTO and the like, where disputes are resolved and common positions are taken with the summit of G20. So all these institutions will decline. That's what the implication is in the long run. And it is a question of the big power, mighty are right. I think that's what is happening.
But, Prof, interesting you mentioned the decline of the United States of America. And many are now starting to wonder, many are starting to think that are we seeing the beginning of the end of the United States of America? And the person responsible for this would be Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah, indeed. Yes and no. The US crisis did not start with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a trigger, is accelerating a process that started with a global financial crisis of 2008. And what follows has been a struggle that the United States still maintain a huge advantage. United States remains the most important, the biggest, and the decline is not a big bang. It's happening slowly, brick by brick. And all these actions are accelerating that process. And if we go back in history, with the decline of other empires, I think do not take place once. It's a lifetime. It will take 10, 20, 30 years, slowly losing certain advantages in certain areas. So what he has done is undermining the US dollar, undermining relations, undermining institutions of global governance, and in the end, increasing the potential of a hot war, whether with China or other countries. So I think we're going to see the crisis moving to other areas, not just trade.
Yes, but Prof, let's focus on China. And we knew that Trump taking on China would be risky because we are seeing the response of China equally aggressive. We will take you on. And this is the reason why we've seen, this trade, we know, between these two countries was huge. But China talking of tariffs of up to 80%. And this, the global world is watching, the global economy is watching, and just to see how this is actually likely to play out and how this is likely to impact on the global economy at large.
I think there are a number of strategies that are at play. Donald Trump operates from the art of the deal, based in his book, that what he does is shock and awe. He shocks everyone and then he pauses. He waits for you to come into negotiation. And he's going to extract more than what he demanded because of panic. Everyone panics, and therefore you're trying to make deals, and arguments are made in our own country that we need to give Donald Trump what Donald Trump wants. That is to be done very carefully, because you give in small, he will demand more. So I think for Chinese, there's a failure of White House to understand the mindset in China. Chinese do not, and President Xi Jinping in particular, do not give in on an humiliating demand and commanding manner. So I think it's a power relation. I mean, given the history of China and the Western world, the Chinese have had 100 years, like us in Africa, of humiliation at the hands of Western world, colonized, subjugated, enslaved to an extent, and humiliated. So I do not think that at this stage, China being number 2 global economy, they would submit to that level in a humiliating way. And therefore, if President Trump is expecting China to give in on this particular issue, I doubt very much. On the other hand, I think what the Chinese are worried about is that the moment they give in on the demands made by President Trump, it's going to have a ripple effect. It will show that they have a weak hand. and anyone else will then start demanding on Chinese. So it's really sad that we'll wait and see. The Chinese play a long game. They have the time, while Americans don't have. President Trump is only 4 years, and therefore we'll see who's going to give in. Already we see signs that Donald Trump will indeed give in.
Yes, this is a very, very important question because, you mentioned demanding, you talk of humiliation. And I think the Chinese have reached a situation, and you're looking at their global standing, that they are in no position to be dictated to. They are in no position to be humiliated. And this is the reason why we've seen the response, despite Donald Trump actually warning China to actually withdraw or he would respond. We've seen this blatant refusal on the part of China and Trump saying again that he says, in fact, China was saying that ripping sorry, I need to get my facts correct, Professor David. Trump said that China will realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Now, when one looks at the type of language that is being used, I mean, you're talking of ripping off, you're talking of not being sustainable, not acceptable. This alone, once again, talks about the arrogance of the United States of America. This once again talks to the arrogance of Donald Trump, who wants it's his way and no other way. So it's my way or the highway.
Yes, I think he has done not only to China, he has done to his own strategic partners in Europe. He has done to us. I think we have been following last 2 3 weeks the manner in which he speaks to South Africa and Africa in general. We all know that, but I think going back to China, Chinese have been preparing for this for many years. They've understood Donald Trump in the first presidency. They prepared domestically. The preparation has been in what they call the dual circulation, that China needs to ensure that its trade more consumer driven at home and less so depending on exports. That process is going on. The process of digitalization, including currents, payment systems, they've done extremely well. So they're really heavily prepared. They also, if you look at trade figures in China with the world, since Donald Trump first presidents, we've seen the shift within China export volumes away from United States, away from Western world, more into the global South. I think it was preparation for this moment that when the crisis hit the fans, they are ready to respond or limit the damage caused by these tariffs. No doubt, this is going to be a lose-lose. It's going to be pain in China, no doubt about that. They trade volume to United States is sitting at 440 billion. That's a lot of money, a lot of products, and they need to find alternative markets. But not only for the Chinese, the very same question need also to be posed to our own government. And to what extent are they searching for alternative markets for our products?
Yes, Prof. But you talk about the pain that will obviously accompany these developments that are taking place, and the question is, how does China minimize the pain? And I know to an extent, as you mentioned, they have been preparing themselves. This was expected. So, to an extent, or they may be able to minimize the damage to an extent, but again, looking at China and its influence across the entire world, its influence on Africa, we're talking about BRICS, we're talking about huge markets like India as well. And on the other side, you've got Russia, you've got Brazil, you've got all these countries as well. And also taking a look at Europe in itself, Western Europe, because we've seen that they've also retaliated with tariffs to the United States of America. So this entire global world economic order, seems appears that it will be taking another dimension at some point in time.
It's already, I think what is emerging are two systems. You're having a United States that is isolating itself and in a process, what we call deglobalization, while China as a pillar, Japan, Europe, EU, and UK are still pro globalization. And therefore, it's a question of understanding these dynamics and to what extent can they work as it stands. Things might change, but I think we're getting into a very tight, rocky 4 years. I think it's going beyond those 4 years. And then we have to be really prepared to ensure that, like China, that has spread the integration within Asia. There's so much that China is doing. President Xi Jinping, as we speak, he is visiting this week or next Vietnam, and he also goes to Malaysia and others. There's a lot of infrastructure that increases integration in terms of rail, in payment system, and agreement within ASEAN in preparation for easing that pressure, as well as China entering into agreement, surprisingly, with some of the US closest allies, your South Korea and Japan. I think they've met already. So there are a lot of things that are happening. So in our own continent, I think there is a need for our own leaders, firstly, to speak with one voice, the African voice. We don't see that. I think we see our leaders taking different positions and approaches. Zimbabwe, that chairs SADC, responded by giving in automatically to US, your Kenya, your Nigeria, and South Africa itself. Their position tend not to be in one position and negotiate with the United States from a position of strength. We're negotiating from a position of weakness, and that will have a huge impact on us.
Yes, and just finally, I know we're talking about a 4-year term for somebody like Donald Trump, and considering what is taking place internally in the United States of America and through the influence of the billionaire class like Elon Musk and others, and how this is actually impacting internally, domestically for the United States of America. At this point in time, there seems to be a lot of resentment of Donald Trump and the direction that he is taking America in. So from within, there may be a lot of pressure, and we are talking 4 years, but we know that we've got a 2-year midterm as well, because that is going to give us a very, very good indication as to what Americans themselves think of the man that they put in power, the man that they elected.
At this particular juncture, I think what we're seeing is the rise of fascism, right wing, and there's a reason for that. That explains why. Liberal democracy as we know it, and Tony Blair recently has even argued that what's happening in the United States and across Europe is that democracy is not delivering food on the table. So I think that question, we also need to answer it at home. To what extent is our democracy really bringing food and resolving crises? So you have a lot of people who are left out, where high-tech jobs and movement of people other than particular people within a country, and the United States, it's a race issue, white male in particular, who are threatened by these changes that are taking place and feel left out. So we see resurgence of these groups, and right-wing and racism are on the rise, not just in the United States, in Europe, and in our country and everywhere else, on a number of issues. But in the US in particular, I do not think that this struggle is just Donald Trump. It's a huge number of people. Chances are there that J.D. Vance might win. So you're talking of another 8 years. And I really do not see Democrats in the short term recovering from the blow that they've been receiving. So I think we need to really watch quite closely, study, and look at the United States in a very innovative way, because there are progressive forces within the United States. So it's not just a question of Donald Trump, United States getting a fascist on the rise and isolate the US. There are forces. There's also a reaction to Donald Trump within, I think, on the streets. We see across the United States people demonstrating. And therefore, I think there is a need for solidarity going back to the days of struggle across the world.
Just, very, very interesting talking to you, Prof. David. If democracy is not the answer, and now that we see this rise of fascism, and we know fascism is also not the answer, what would be the answer?
I think democracy is inherently good, but it depends what form of democracy. I think the form of democracy we've been having, it's a market-driven democracy, and I get irritated even at home. We hear constantly throughout the elections, and even now, that certain parties, certain people won't be happy because markets are going to react. Who are these markets? And I think we need to ask that. That's where the crisis lies, where we leave the voice of the people in terms of their right to elect people and to have particular certain form of delivery policies, and reject that and have side agreements to appease a particular section of society. I think markets are important, but so are the people, the voice of the people and the needs of the people. So I think in the US, the markets-driven democracy that all of us embrace, it's in a crisis, a huge crisis, that a rethink is needed to ensure that, in our case, have democracy that is accepted across the continent, that brings in our norms and values, that brings in our customs. And yeah, of course, we are not advocating for dictatorship. We are advocating a democracy, but a people-centered democracy. That's what we need.
Well, Prof, an absolute pleasure engaging with you all the time, and we thank you. We do appreciate you taking time out. All the best to you, sir.
To you too. Thank you.
Professor David Monyae joining us this morning, and I must say, a fascinating insight into what is playing out globally, and particularly with regard to this trade war between the United States of America and China. Next up, we have got Professor Jeff Halper on standby. 970 pilots face expulsion for opposing the Gaza genocide, and it's termed cracks in the cockpit.